when we came back, even say from a 2-day trip to Trenton, well, then the 6 months started all over. The idea was to make sure no one noticed. Let me read you how the president himself put it in a letter to his secretary. This is what he wrote. If upon taking good advice it is found expedient to send them back to Virginia, I wish to have it accomplished under pretext that may deceive both them and the public. So that is how it was. We used the trips when we could to keep ties with our families in Virginia. Our love for them, in fact, kept people from running away more than any punishment, any threat of sale or beating ever could. The president was never at ease keeping us as slavery in Philadelphia. Free blacks talked to us and told us what was possible. Washington knew, as he wrote, that the idea of freedom might be too great a temptation for them to resist. It was. And only Judge was the first to prove him right. She escaped from this house in 1796. She lived in New Hampshire, married a sailor named Jack Staines, and had 3 children. During his presidency and after, George Washington tried to have her caught and brought back. She lived free into her 70s. Oney's half-brother, Austin, had been a waiter at Mount Vernon and may have driven Martha north during the Revolutionary War. In Philadelphia, he worked in the stables with Washington's 14 horses and 4 carriages. When he died after a fall in 1794, he left besides his sister Oney, his wife, Charlotte, and 5 children, all slaves in Virginia.
Dad, won't you do just getting high?
Maul cared for the grandchildren. Clean. At 50, she even painted these rooms and went back to Mount Vernon at the end of the president's term. She belonged to Martha Washington. Unlike the president, Mrs. Washington did not set anyone free. Instead, as an old woman, Maul and 152 others were given to the grandchildren.
Dad, can we go to the next store?
Hercules, the cook, escaped in February 1797 at the end of Washington's presidency and was never heard from again. In later years, a few people claimed to have eaten meals in New York City taverns that could have only been cooked by the legendary Hercules. His children, Richmond, Evie, and Delia, remained in bondage. Hercules' son, Richmond, was allowed to work with his father in Philadelphia when he was 13, but was sent back to Mount Vernon after a year. In November 1796, when he was caught with a saddlebag with money in it, the president assumed that he was preparing to escape with his daddy. Richmond got sent off to an outlying farm away from his family. When Hercules escaped, Richmond would not go with him.
That's the bell that they climbed up.
Oh, yeah.
To look.
Giles lived next to the stables here at the president's house. He drove the baggage wagon for Washington's Southern tour in 1791. On that trip, he got injured so bad that he couldn't ride anymore. So they left him back in Mount Vernon.
Hold on.
On the Southern tour of 1791, Paris was 16. He drove the carriage and worked in the stable. The president called him self-willed and impudent and did not want him to come back to Philadelphia. A few years later, there was a sickness at Mount Vernon. Paris is one of the slaves who died. Postilion Joe Richardson, owned by Martha Washington, would drive the team of horses for the president's carriage.
Daddy, no way not.
Joe's wife,
Thomas.
Sal, was owned by George Washington.
Thomas! Get over
Will
here.
freed her, but she chose to stay with her husband, Joe.
I don't care. You don't walk around.
She was inherited, in effect, along with him and 151 others, by Martha Washington's grandchildren. I wonder how a husband and wife talk about that. And I wonder whether George and Martha Washington talked about it. That he would free the people he owned, but that she
I
would
can
not.
see her.
And me? I was taken back to Mount Vernon in 1791. After Washington's presidency, I became his body servant. When I was bitten by a rabid dog, the president sent me up to Lebanon, Pennsylvania for a cure, and I survived. 2 years later, I married a woman from a plantation nearby. The general found a note I wrote her about running away and stopped us. So I was there to attend him on his deathbed. But as I belonged to Martha, I was never set free.